thought about that.
All right. Okay. Yeah, the levels are fine. Okay. May I get your name, please? And if you could spell your last name, that'd be great.
Okay, my first name is Dannie, D-A-N-N-I-E. Legal middle name is Sue, S-U-E. Do you want a maiden name as well?
No, that's fine.
Bell, B-E-L-L.
Okay. And my name's Suzanne Dennett, and we are in Atlanta, Georgia for a Religious Lives interview at 3 o'clock on May 2nd, 2013. Okay, the first thing we're going to talk about is religion in your childhood. So another thing, too, is one of the things we're really trying to spark here is memories and stories. So this interview is definitely not a yes-no type thing. It's very loose. And so a lot of times you'll say to people, oh, that's a long story. That's the story we want. So feel free to elaborate. So what is your earliest memory concerning religion in your childhood? And if you can remember a specific moment or event, that would be great.
I guess maybe my very, very earliest moment was spending the night at my aunt's house. And I think my daddy was there, and he died when I was 4, so this is an early memory, and my mom. And I was having a hard time going to sleep. And I think my mom told me to pray. I don't remember that, to ask God to help me go to sleep or something. I don't know. But that is my probably very earliest memory of, I just have religion in there somewhere. I have prayer or something with that memory. It was dark because it was night. The next one, I guess I remember, is when I came home from kindergarten and my mother, the house was just full of people, and my mom met me at the door and took me back to the bedroom in the back and said, God has taken Daddy to live with him in heaven. And so that sounded like a pretty good deal at the time. But later on at the funeral, when they held me up and showed me him lying there very silently in the coffin, then, of course, I cried and realized I wasn't going to see him again. But my mom was the granddaughter of a Primitive Baptist minister. Jimmy Jordan, or Jimmy Jordan, her family pronounced it Jordan, but it's spelled J-O-R-D-A-N, and he was the pastor of the Camp Creek Primitive Baptist Church in Gwinnett County for 40 years or something like that, and his son was my mother's father, and so she was well versed in in religion, and I know she and my dad were very active in Decatur First Methodist Church. That's where I grew up. I was told that I'm on the cradle roll there. So from a baby, I was raised in the Methodist Church. And I'm going beyond your question, was my very first memory.
Go ahead.
But I have 2 letters from my dad's friends that they wrote my mom after he died, and they talked about him being an usher and helping so much in the church and how they were going to miss him and so forth.
Oh, that's so sweet. Yeah. So you grew up in Decatur then?
Grew up in Decatur. Yeah, I was within walking distance of Decatur First.
Near here?
No, and it was off Ponce de Leon, real near Glenwood School.
Okay. And what role did religion play in your childhood and with your family?
It was major. My mom was a member of, I know, at least one circle, which was a Methodist group of women who did, certain things and sent money to the missions. Okay. And my dad, of course, was active. He died, and 4 years later, my mom married a guy who had lived across the street from us. So his wife had died, and some friends got them together, and fell in love, and there's a story about that has to do with God, if you'd like to hear
Yeah,
it.
I'd love to hear it.
My mom said, as she was getting dressed to go to my daddy's funeral, she had this feeling come over her, don't worry, Mr. Avery will take care of you. And she said at the time that was no stranger a feeling to her than having lost her husband, having realized she's raising a child by herself, all that, because I was an only child. And when they began dating later and got serious, everybody called him Pappy, Mr. Avery. But he said that he had had a similar feeling also, that he was to be with her. So, you know,
Wow.
they knew they were supposed to be together. And I knew him, and it was just lovely.
Oh.
You know,
Avery, I'm starting to put this together. So, just as an aside,
Yes.
how is this Avery related to the Avery that I know, that my son knows?
The Avery that was my stepfather was the father of, what is her name?
Amanda.
Amanda's, my stepbrother is the grandfather of Amanda. Jeff is his son.
Okay, great.
So we're related.
We're related.
You and I are related.
Connections here.
Yes,
Yeah, we just have to
indeed.
put that qualification in there.
My stepfather was a pharmacist.
Mm-hmm.
So he was William E. Avery Sr., doctor,
Mm-hmm.
and my stepbrother was a dentist in Decatur for many years, and he was Dr. William E. Avery Jr., and the mail was just amazing mix-ups that they got.
Oh, I
you know.
bet.
Yeah.
Well, once your mother remarried, did she change churches?
No.
Did you?
As a matter of fact, they talked about getting another house, but I was 8 years old, and my friends, my neighborhood, my school, everything was right there, and I really didn't want to move. And I don't know what kind of fit I threw, if any, but they ended up staying in the house. He had moved to the Candler Hotel, and that's an old hotel, kind of where Parker's is now in Decatur.
Okay.
On that corner, and the electric, you know, whatever, it's right there in the corner of the Candler Hotel. And he was living there because both of his children had married, and his wife was gone, and he traveled more than he was at home.
Okay.
So he just moved his clothes into the Candler Hotel. So then he came and lived in our house where we had, you know, been living, which was on Ponce de Leon Court, and so. He was not active in the church like my daddy was because he was gone all the time.
Right.
You know, he'd be gone for
Right.
6 weeks at a time sometimes. He worked for C.B. Fleet Company, and his territory when they married was Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. He went and sat in. He was like a pharmacy rep.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
and he'd go and sit in their offices and then take them products and stuff. So.
Wow. And other than church, and you went to church once a week?
I went to church. My mom and I used to go on Wednesday night to the Wednesday night suppers.
Okay.
And
Was it good food?
Good, always good food at the Methodist Church, my dear.
I judge churches by the quality
Oh
of
yeah,
their food.
it was good to me. And then I would go on Sunday. And as I grew older, I was this is probably in the adolescent era, but I was very active in the Methodist Youth Fellowship.
Okay.
And I was one of those people that, you know, we'd all get there and nobody had done the program for the night, so they'd say, Danny, so you do it, and I would. And I could whip a program together in no time. You know, I was very active. And then ended up singing in all 3 choirs.
Okay.
So I was very, very active in the Methodist Church, yeah.
And did you pray at home? Did you have
Yeah.
a prayer practice when you were a child?
As far as I know, I did. I'm sure my mom did, and we may have prayed together. I don't remember that part. But I remember considering God a loving Father And I feel so bad for people who don't have that feeling about God. And there are a lot of them out there, as you know, maybe I've talked to people. But God for me was a loving Father that I could talk to about anything. And in thinking about this interview, I thought, I really believe I can say that I never was angry with God. I never put him out of my life. He's just always been there. And so I'm very lucky, I think, in that regard, as far as me is concerned.
Was, when you were a child, I don't know if you could remember this, but you said you considered him a loving father. Was this a feeling? Was this an emotion? Was this more of an intellectual understanding?
I don't know, except that I was surrounded with loving fathers. There's an uncle, my mother's sister had a wonderful husband, and he had a store in Decatur, Smith's Shoes, and before that it was Decatur Bargain Store, and he had a lot of different products. He finally went to shoes. But my father used to work for him on Saturdays. My dad worked at Hartford Insurance, and he would go work with my uncle on Saturdays. And the Saturday before my dad died on a Monday at age 37, he and my uncle had been talking about, if something happened to one of them, their family would be left alone. And they shook hands. They said, if something happens to me, will you take care of my family? Yes, and I'll do the same for you. And they shook hands. Well, 2 days later, my dad was dead. And my uncle took that promise very, very seriously. He and his wife moved in with us right away, and he took care of me, got me off to school. My mom was able to get right back into a teaching job. She had been a teacher and then given it up, to take care of me. But all her friends in Decatur school system got her back in, and she taught again.
Wow.
And somebody had to get me and plait my hair and get me ready for kindergarten, and my uncle did that. So he was he was another father to me, and his wife was another mother. And then my mother's family was huge. She was one of 9. I grew up in Stone Mountain. And every Sunday, the whole family got together again at my grandmother's house. And they had a little wheel, and they would turn it to see who was going to bring the vegetables and who was going to bring this, that, and the other. And I had all those uncles and aunts and, all sorts of people. And my grandfather was just wonderful. And all the men in the family were very loving and very kind and all very church-going and believers and stuff. And it wasn't a revival every Sunday morning like that, but they did go to church, and they were just good people. So and then later, when Rick and I got married, there was an uncle who we went to for our insurance. There was another uncle we went to buy appliances, and it was just wonderful. To have all those uncles to take care of things.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, you went to public school.
Yes.
Did you remember any? So, what if you kind of? You're gonna have to give us your age later. So, about what time frame was it that you would have been in elementary school? What year?
I've tried to figure that out from time to time.
What year?
In the 40s.
In the 40s.
Yeah,
okay.
I was born in 37.
Okay, and so was there any religious practices in the public schools in Decatur?
We read the Bible. We read the Bible in the morning.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't.
In your class?
Yeah, I don't remember praying. I remember the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay.
I don't remember whether we prayed or not, but there were Bible readings.
Okay.
Early on, anyway.
Okay.
I went to Glenwood School, and at the time it was just a 1 through 7 school.
Okay. And do you remember in your childhood if you knew of anybody of a different religion than you? what your first association was with someone of a different religion.
Well, there were people that were, my next door neighbor was Presbyterian.
Okay.
There were people in my class I know who were Baptist,
Okay.
but it kind of didn't come up in elementary school much, as my memory. And an Episcopalian, this guy that I really liked. I mean, we were girlfriend and boyfriend, in the later elementary schools. He took piano, and he was a member of Holy Trinity Episcopal Church, which is right across the street from Glenwood School.
Mm-hmm.
And he went over one day and turned on the outside chimes and played a little wigwam on the organ, and it went out all over Decatur.
Love it.
What a fun guy.
Yeah. So all of these people that you knew of different religions, they were still Christian religions.
Yeah, I did not know any Jewish people at all, as I remember, until I went to Emory.
Okay.
And then, I certainly didn't know any, Buddhists, Hindu, Muslims, anybody else that, we might know now.
Yeah. I'm just curious, was your school racially integrated at that time?
Oh, no.
No, okay. So the schools were segregated.
Absolutely
and pretty
segregated.
much legally, quote unquote.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, segregated schools. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you have identified yourself religiously as a child if someone had asked you, what religion are you, Danny?
I'm a Methodist.
You would have said a Methodist.
Yeah.
Okay. And how did you feel about religion? We're going to segue now as you moved out of your childhood into your adolescence. So let's say starting middle school. Before I do that, were you baptized into the Methodist Church?
Yes, I was.
And
as a baby.
Okay. Do you remember that?
No, but my mother said that after the preacher baptized me and said a prayer and said amen, I said amen. But of course, I was a babe in arms, and so whatever I was gurgling was probably a gas bubble or something, but she said it sounded just like amen, so
I love
she
it.
felt sort of good about that.
So how did you feel like getting into your adolescence? What middle school did you go to?
There was no middle school
Okay.
at the time. There were 7 grades in elementary,
Mm-hmm.
4 grades in high school, and so we just had an 11-grade system.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they put in the 8th grade, 2 years before I went into high school.
Okay.
And so the 8th grade, instead of my going from 7th grade to what would now be 9th grade, freshman, which we would have been, they stuck an 8th grade in there. And all the people in that grade were people who had moved into the city. So it was a tiny little 8th grade that year. And then the next year, there were more people. And, so when we got there, there was a full 8th grade.
Okay. And did you, so you continued to go to the same church?
Yeah, went to the same church, got even more active, because that's when the MYF started, And so I've had a lot of friends, a lot of good friends, met from all over the city who were in that, and we had our own little social group, and very, very active.
Did the kids talk about religion back then?
I don't remember talking much about religion. I know that there were some, that wanted to know if I'd been saved, because that was big in their church, and I'm not sure what I said, because that was kind of different terminology for me. But I don't remember discussing religion with a lot of people at that age.
Okay.
I did walk to high school with a girl who was a year older than me, and we would stop. We had a group that walked to school together and picking up people along the way, and her house was sort of the last house on the route, and we'd get to go in and visit with her family a little bit while she was getting ready or whatever. They were really sweet to us, and they were Catholic, and that was interesting to me. And I asked her a lot of questions about the Catholic faith.
Mm-hmm.
And they would invite me up to watch Bishop Sheen, because we didn't have a TV and they did. So I used to watch Bishop Sheen with her. And
in your mind, was that different than your religion?
yes.
How so?
Well, for one thing, they had crucifixes on the wall instead of just plain crosses. And I said, why is Jesus still nailed to the cross when he's been resurrected? You know, the usual ignorant question. And, you know, there was a statue of Mary, and I said, do you pray to that? No, you know, we don't pray to that. They just didn't have cameras back then. So this is how we remember her. I remember Barbara saying, if your mother was dead, but you had a really nice picture of her, wouldn't you put that out? So we put this out because Mary is, you know, kind of like our mother, because she's Jesus' mother.
Right.
And stuff like that. And then I started going to Mass with them. And meanwhile, I had gotten curious about the Catholic faith. And I don't know whether she sparked it or something else. But in, you know, the Parade magazine and the Atlanta Journal, they used to run ads by the Knights of Columbus, which is a Catholic men's organization. And they would say, you know, they would have a little blurb about something, some article of faith, and then they would say, if you'd like to know more about this, you know, we'll be glad to send you a booklet, blah, blah, blah. So I sent off for multitudes of those things and would get them and read them, and the more I read, the more interesting it was to me. So as a high school person, I was kind of wondering, you know, about the Catholic faith. But I didn't know a lot of Catholics because there weren't very many around here at that time.
Okay.
I don't even think St. Thomas More Church in Decatur was built till the 50s sometime.
Oh, okay. And did your mom have any issues with this?
I don't remember any issues at all because Barbara's family was so nice and she was so nice. And you know, I don't recall any issues at all. One of my cousins married a Catholic and converted, and later on somebody else did too. But right away, you know, there was a little talk about that, you know, but it wasn't negative. It was just an item of interest.
Oh, that's interesting. And so you already said you didn't have any contact with people of other religions other than
No, I
the
really
Catholic.
didn't, and we were still segregated.
And that was up through graduation?
Oh yes.
Oh.
It would,
So there was no. Was there any kind of discord that you felt like you were curious about the Catholic Church? Did any of this correspond to like just being curious about God in general? Was there any kind of angst or questioning that went on during puberty or during your high school years?
not God exactly. I'm trying to think. I think I was really in college. I started dating a Jewish guy.
Okay.
So then I got interested in what Judaism was.
Okay.
And I had backed off after I graduated from high school. I backed off from all the MYF and all that, you know. I was still singing in the choir, but I wasn't, you know. And then you go to church when you sing in the choir.
Right.
But I wasn't doing any of the youth stuff at all. But I, you know, I was interested in the Jewish faith, and I thought, well, you know, I'd like to learn about that. And so there was a Jewish girl. I took geology to keep out of tape from taking chemistry. And we were bumping along in some truck one time, and I asked her some questions about the Jewish faith. And she was Jewish, and so she answered my questions, and that was interesting, I thought.
Did you ever feel like these people are not going to be going to heaven, or was that ever an issue for you?
I don't remember whether that was an issue or not. I just honestly don't remember.
Okay. Well, when you graduated from high school then, if someone were to have asked you, what is your religion? What would you have said as a high school graduate?
I would have said Methodist.
You still would have said Methodist.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you went to college at Emory.
2 years at Emory.
Okay.
And then I went to Auburn.
Oh, okay.
Which was a strange transition to leave a prestigious and go to a cow college. But,
Cow college.
Well, it was Alabama Polytechnic Institute.
Oh, Auburn sounds so much better, doesn't it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But I graduated from API instead of Rick. But when I went down there, I asked, people around, what's the best choir in the city? And they said the Presbyterian Church. So I went to the Presbyterian Church and sang in their morning choir. Mm-hmm. And so then I got the Presbyterian take on things, And
how was that different? Do you remember?
The communion was different.
How so?
Because in the Methodist Church, you went down the aisle and you knelt at the altar, and they passed around little individual, pardon the expression, shot glasses, little bitty ones with grape juice, and crumbled up crackers or something, and they'd pass that to you, and you'd drink that, and they'd pass the little plate of whatever, and you'd take that, and then you'd get up and walk away. And in the Presbyterian Church, at the time anyway, it was just sent down the row.
Oh, okay.
That's my memory of it. Now, I was up in the choir and I couldn't see squat, but I think that's probably what it was. And I thought that was rather odd.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Do you remember any of the doctrine being different?
No, I remember the pastor speaking once on Martin Luther, and his take on Martin Luther was a little different from my take on Martin Luther, and I remember thinking, that's interesting. But I was also singing, by that time, I was singing for the night choir, in the youth choir, at the Baptist Church, because they had a good choir at the Baptist Church. So I was singing, I was a Methodist, never went to the Methodist Church, ever, when I was in Auburn. I went, singing in the Presbyterian choir, the Baptist choir. And then after Rick and I started dating, and I'm getting ahead of myself perhaps with the story, but we were singing in the Catholic choir.
Okay.
And I started going to the Catholic Church. But there's a big chunk in there.
So were you actually simultaneously singing in two different choirs?
Mm-hmm. Wow. That morning I'd be a Presbyterian, and that night I'd be a Baptist.
And they didn't pay you for this. This was just all volunteer. Yeah, I just didn't know if you were a ringer or not.
I left the Baptist choir probably first because I walked in early one night and I heard a class going on, and they were talking about would the poor, person in the tribe in the darkest Africa go to hell because he hadn't been baptized. Because, they said you had to be baptized to get to heaven. And they were having a big discussion about that. And I thought, I don't think my God would do that. Mm-hmm. And so I suddenly realized I was in the wrong place. Okay. And I didn't go back and sing with them anymore.
Was that the first time that you had been exposed to that concept?
I don't know, but I had an already opinion formed
right
in my head about it.
Yeah, it just didn't go along with your idea of who God was and what He would be doing.
And His love.
Right.
See, God was love to me.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't the big judge in the sky, giving points for this, that, or the other. Mm-hmm. He was a loving Father.
Yeah. Now, did you have a prayer practice in college or any other kind of personal religious or meditative practices?
As I remember, I had, at least night prayers. I don't know about morning prayers, but I did, I'd get in bed at night and I'd say my prayers.
Mm-hmm. And what are the prayers for the Methodist? Is it the
I wouldn't say, I just talk.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't do a lot of already written by somebody else prayers at the time. Yeah.
Would you ask God for things?
Yes.
And would you get them?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
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 I just let him know what I, wanted and thank him for things that had happened. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And were there any other practices that you had as far as, I know journaling, it seems, is big in somebody's lives.
no, I had a diary as a child, but I didn't have I didn't do journaling. I don't think I'd ever heard of the concept.
Up to this point,
Paper hadn't been invented yet.
She's not that old. Up until this point, had you had any like kind of extrasensory or metaphysical experiences? Anything out of the ordinary that you remember as a child or up until like your college days?
My mom was good at that, but I don't. Nothing stands out to me, but she told me stories of things for her, that were kind of interesting.
Tell me one of them.
Well, she got up out of bed one morning. It was probably before I was born, because she didn't mention that I was with her. She said she just woke up, got dressed, drove downtown to the train station, and met the train that my dad was coming in on, that he hadn't told her he was taking an earlier train.
Nice.
And then the thing about, that Mr. Avery was going to take care of her. And she just kind of knew things, and I always felt like she had a direct line to God, and even my children would ask her to pray for things for them, so yeah, she was an amazing woman.
Oh, that's cool. So you were in school at Tuskegee. What is it
No.
called? No, not Tuskegee. We were talking about that
Auburn.
earlier. Okay, and was that integrated at the time?
No.
Okay, so that was still segregated.
Yeah, there was talk of integrating graduate school,
Okay.
but I never saw a black person on the Auburn campus.
Okay, and none of your faculty, your teachers were okay.
No.
And you got your degree in
English.
In English, and did you go for an advanced degree at that point?
I did.
Okay, and you got your master's in English?
No, I did not. There were a lot of things swirling around in my head at that time, because I did. Can I tell you a backstory?
Yes, please.
90 minutes, it'll be 2 days. I was in an English class with a guy, and Catholicism came up somehow. I don't know whether it was in the writing or something the professor said, but I said, I'm kind of interested in Catholicism myself. And he said, well, I'm Catholic. And he said, why don't I take you to see this really great priest that I know? And I said, that would just be wonderful, because I've got a lot of questions. And he said, well, Rick can come because he's Catholic too. And I said, he is? And we'd been going out for a while,
and
a few months, and I had no idea. We'd never discussed our faith. So, so we went to some little seminary. I can't remember what it was. It was young people, and had lunch with this priest. And then we had a talk with him, and then he just said to me, if you have any other questions, just write me and I'll write you back. Well, we carried on this grand correspondence, and he wrote the most beautiful letters that helped me understand, and I hope I still have them upstairs in the attic. I must go up and look. But finally he said, I think you probably need to just start instruction with the priest there in Auburn. So I called the priest in Auburn, and I went by and started once a week. And I had a little book, and I'd read what was in the book, and then I'd meet him, and we'd talk about it. And that went on for a school year.
Okay.
And then I think I was through, maybe at that time, at Auburn, and he said, you can finish this at home when you go home. So that summer, I went to a priest up at St. Thomas More.
Okay.
And and I also started singing in their choir that summer in the fall. And so I finished my instructions, and I realized, I don't know any Catholics except Barbara and Rick.
Mm-hmm.
And is this something I want to do? Because, I'll be so different from everybody. I'll be the only one in my family. I'll be the only one among my friends. Because Barbara had gone to college somewhere else, and I never saw her anymore. I mean, I did, but not then.
Not in a regular.
Yeah. So it was not a matter of belief exactly. It was a matter of, this is major.
Mm-hmm.
This back then it was major,
right,
to become a Catholic, and so I told Rick yesterday. I said, I have a memory of standing when I came home from Auburn. I did all the coursework toward my master's, and then he left to go play jazz somewhere, and I was, my roommate and I just loved my roommate, but she was finishing up her master's, and so was I, and so she decided to move in with two other grad students because she was going to go further, I think, with her degree than me, and I came home before I wrote my thesis, and they said, everybody I talked to said, don't leave, you'll never write your thesis. And I said, there are 5, now there are 100,000. 5 colleges in Atlanta, I can use their libraries, I'll have privileges. Do not fear. And of course, I never wrote it. So
how unusual. I was kidding.
yeah, my graduate degree came from Georgia State. But anyway, I don't know what we were talking about.
So you moved back here?
Yes, I moved back here. Oh, that's right. Thank you very much. And so I was working in a recording studio in Decatur.
Oh.
Sam Wilhoit, did you ever know Sam?
I did, yeah.
And so I was his secretary in the morning and receptionist, and then in the afternoon I would sing jingles and commercials and stuff, and somebody else would answer the phone. And so I remember being in that office, either at my desk or standing, I can't remember which, and thinking, I've got to do this because that's me now. I'm Catholic, and I just need to join up. And I don't care if Rick doesn't ask me to marry him. I don't care if I don't have any other friends, I'll make friends. But for my own personal self, I need to become a Catholic. And I told my parents, and my mom said, there's just one thing that I would like to ask you to do. Would you do for me? And I said, sure. And she said, because I would go to church with her when I came home on the weekend.
Right.
But it was too late. And I really didn't enjoy it, but I was with her, and that was cool, But then I started singing in the choir, and so I guess I don't remember going back much. But she said, I want you to investigate your own faith like you investigated the Catholic faith. And I said, fair enough. So she took me up to the little library in the Methodist Church, and we pulled the books about the beginnings of the church and all that. And she said, and I want you to talk to the preacher who baptized you about this. So I left with an armful of books and an appointment with the preacher. And he was pretty old by that time, and so he said, I want you to talk to the pastor. I think you should talk to your pastor instead of me. So I went to talk to my pastor, and he said lots of things, but I remember 2 things stood out, and I hope I can remember both of them. One was, are you doing this because you're going to marry a Catholic? And I said, no, sir, I'm doing it for me. And then somehow priests came into the thing, and the conversation, and he said, all the priests I know are alcoholics. And I thought, you're not helping me. You're not helping me at all here. Then I read the books, and again, it was too late, you know, and I had already decided that I wanted to be a member of the church that Jesus founded, not the church that John Wesley founded. And I'm sure he thought he was doing the right thing at the time, but I wanted to belong to the church that Jesus started because that church was the church for so many years. Good, bad, scandal, you know, bad things. I mean, but God only has people to work with, and people are not always good. So you kind of expect stuff like that, I guess, when you've got people involved.
Right.
So then I made a arrangement. I told my mom, you know, that I really believed that I would go ahead, and they came to my baptism. I asked to be rebaptized. I don't think they'll do that now, but I asked to be rebaptized, and they rebaptized me.
And did you go through confirmation?
Not then, no. Let me tell you that the priest in Auburn, at his own expense, caught the train, came up here, stayed overnight in the rectory. The Saturday morning, he baptized me.
Oh.
Then I took him to the train, and he went back to Auburn for, you know, to get back. But I thought that was so sweet. He wouldn't let me pay him, nothing, you know. He was just a sweet guy, and he heard my first confession, and then baptized me, and then the next day, my first communion was not, you know, like the little girls in the white dresses and the veils. It was just going to Mass, getting in line like everybody else, and going down and receiving, all by myself. And I kind of realized that's the way it was going to be, you know. So.
Wow. Now, that's very interesting about how you said you wanted to belong to the church that Jesus founded and not Martin Luther. And was that in your understanding at the time?
Yes, it was, and I had come to that realization. Catholicism is kind of a long thing. I mean, it's not like you can just sign up. You know, there's so much to grasp and to understand, especially if you don't start out that way. And I was having some problems in late, I guess, early college maybe, about was Jesus really who he said he was. Okay. I never thought of that before, but somehow or other I got on that, you know. And a very good friend of mine said, finally, in exasperation, well, Danny said, he was either who he said he was, or he was a raving lunatic. And I thought about that, and I thought, you're right. So once I decided that, yes, he was telling the truth. And, you know, he did work miracles and stuff, you know, and influenced a whole bunch of folks. Then I had to also accept everything he said as the truth. So then that set me on the path of, well, how do I know what he said? And for Catholics, the Bible is not the only thing that we look back on. We look back on tradition and what people were doing, and the Gospels. You know, they said somebody wrote, we're not saying everything Jesus did. We're just saying these things to help you understand. I'm not quoting directly, obviously, but help you to understand and know some of the things that he did. So then when he gave the Ten Commandments, I had to, and since they, you know, the writers have them, or some writer has it, I'm not real good with the Bible, you know. If I'd grown up Baptist, I could tell you the chapter and verse, but I didn't. But the things that Jesus said, then I had to believe those too. So, and then the things that the people who knew Jesus said, because probably nowhere in the Bible it said, and Mary didn't have any more children. They talk about Jesus' brothers and sisters.
Right.
And so if you take that for value, you say, well, wait a minute, something's wrong here. But then you go back and you discover that brothers and sisters were terms used for, cousins and, whoever. So
Right.
a lot of little tricky things I had to navigate, but I finally came to the conclusion that they knew what they were talking about because they were there.
Okay. Did any more of those questions come up after you became a Catholic?
Well, after I became a Catholic, and I loved, we're talking the old church, Latin, bells ringing,
okay.
all that.
Incense.
Yeah.
Okay. The
Incense.
priest is still not facing
No,
them?
the priest's back is to you, and he's speaking Latin, and the only reason you've got your little book, and when he does certain things, that means you're over here. Bells ring, then wait, you've got to go to where the bells are, and so that's the church I joined.
Mm-hmm.
The music was just wonderful. It was mostly chant, and a few little hymns and stuff, but they were very reverent, very dignified. And then came Vatican II.
Okay.
And
Was that church in Decatur? Okay, so St. Thomas More.
Yeah. Because that's where I was going.
Okay.
Until Rick and I married, and then we moved to Biloxi, and that's where I was confirmed, by the way.
Okay.
I got a job teaching at the Catholic Girls High School there, teaching English, and I was confirmed with all their people one time.
Okay. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
so
that's
Vatican
okay.
II.
Yeah,
Vatican
so
II and St.
when
Thomas
we
More.
moved back here, we went back to St. Thomas More.
Okay.
And then Vatican II came along, and a lot of changes. And I remember we had someone for dinner one night in this very room, I do believe. I was sitting there, and he was sitting here, and I said, there's so many changes, there's so many people that are angry about this, that just, and the priest said, well, we're after quality, not quantity. He said, we're trying to
What
get
an answer.
We're trying to get this right,
Oh.
and people will probably come around, and I think most people did. We had a friend who left the church; he was furious, but he came back. And a lot of people never did, but he did, because you figure the truth is still there.
Yeah.
It's just got a different trappings, different, something. And the whole idea was to get the people involved.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they'd have a song leader, and the song leader would say, now we will sing hymn number so-and-so. And it would be so pitiful. And having grown up in the Methodist Church, where they just sing their hearts out, and everybody sing, and very few people were singing, and it just was awful. And they were singing hymns that I'd grown up singing.
Yeah.
And I just said to Rick and anybody else who would listen, it's us converts that are getting you through this, because we know how to sing, and you people don't know how to sing, but we are singing, and soon you will be singing.
Right. Wow. Well, tell me a little bit more about Biloxi. Why did you move there?
Rick had already gone down. He had a friend that was in the Auburn Nights Orchestra, which is why I went down to Auburn to sing with the big band. Mm-hmm. And he was in the big band, and that's how we met. So after I graduated, he had gone on the road at a time when he should have been finishing his undergraduate thesis. He was an art illustration major, and so he chose to go on play music, and then he came back to school that fall and finished his thesis. So he graduated after I did. I graduated in the year before, because I had rushed through school, and I was ahead of myself, and then he got a quarter behind. And so I had already graduated, and he was still there, and he was
Okay.
such a cute thing, and I just was trying to make him, fall in love and ask me to marry him. So I decided to get my master's based on the fact that Rick was still there, and I didn't
Okay.
want to leave. So then I stayed, and then he graduated, but I was still there. So for about 6 months, he played in a combo with a friend, and he taught drawing classes at Auburn, for the students. He was
Right.
kind of a teaching fellow, and did that and played in this combo. And then a friend who had been a knight graduated. He'd gone to Biloxi, and he was living there and playing jazz. And he said, "Come down here. You can stay with me and my wife until you find, a job in an apartment." So I was encouraging him to go, and because I said, "Here's this chance,
Yeah.
for you." So he went down there, and then after he left, I was so miserable without him, and then I was going to have to move in with 2 people I didn't even know, and all this stuff. So that's why I left.
Yeah.
About the same time he did. But then when he proposed to me the following December, then we got married and moved, and he was already there working.
Right.
He had an apartment, and so I went down and lived in his apartment. And then, we had planned to stay there and all this stuff, and then Al Maletto called and wanted him to go on the road, and he said, "I just got married, I really don't want to go on the road." And Al asked who he married, and he told him me, and Al said, "Well, I heard her sing, I heard her sit in at Sorrento's, downtown." And he said, "Bring her, she can be our vocalist, and take over the top part in the vocal group that somebody was leaving, who was also a friend of ours." So we went on the road 6 weeks after we got married, packed up everything we had just unpacked, and went on the road for 5 months. And so when we came back, the reason we came back was that his original jazz band called him and said, "Please come back, we need you." And Rick was having to play a lot of baritone on the Al Maletto gig, and he didn't like to play baritone, and it was screwing up his embouchure, and he was playing so much that it was hurting his mouth, and so he decided to go back. And I was pregnant, and I couldn't have kept on singing much longer anyway, so we went back to Biloxi. And the week that we got back, and I had a baby, was the week he lost the job. They fired him. So then I started, looking for a job. But actually, I had started looking for a job before then, because I hadn't had the baby when I worked there. When we got back, the band that called him back was also fired because the guy sold the club right out from under him. So while they were scrambling around trying to get gigs, I said, "I can teach." So I, went over to the high school and got a job teaching and taught until 2 weeks before Jody was born. So.
What was it like in Biloxi?
Oh, I got 10 years worth of Catholic history in Biloxi. Statues in the front yard, of the people's houses. When you walked in front of the church, you'd make the sign of the cross. When you drove in front of the church, when you were on the bus moving past the church, you'd make the sign of the cross as you passed the church.
Did you do this because you were Catholic, or would everyone just kind of do it?
Everybody did. I mean,
love it.
I don't imagine non-Catholics did, but it was such a Catholic place.
Okay.
And so everybody we knew was Catholic, except I don't know about the musicians because we didn't talk about it, but it just seemed like, lots of people were Catholic. And we probably sang in the choir there. I don't remember.
Wow.
But just a lot of Catholicism. And I was teaching in a school that had Mass every day.
Wow.
Before lunch. And so we went to Mass every day. And I was confirmed there.
Okay. And then what brought you back to Atlanta?
Rick, that was the day that the week that Jody and I came home from the hospital. Rick lost a job, And it was right before Easter, so he got a job selling shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember how the guys used to run out into the mall and try to pull you into the shoe store? You know, that's not Rick. But he took that job, and he took one counting traffic. Like this thumb was clicking on north-south traffic, and this thumb was clicking on east-west traffic, to see how many people passed a billboard at certain times of the day. I mean, he would have done
Wow.
anything.
Yeah.
And finally, we said, this is ridiculous. You know, this is just ridiculous. And so, a couple of months after Jody was born, we decided to come back to Atlanta, and I had a brother-in-law, Mr. Avery's daughter's husband, who worked for the VA, and he told him that the CDC was hiring and had an art department, art and animation department, and Rick loved animation, and so he took the civil service exam while he was still in Biloxi, and then my other father uncle, drove down, and we had, you know, the movers, I guess, took what little we had, I don't remember, and then we took us back home.
Yeah.
And my dad was out of town as usual, so we stayed with her for a while, and then stayed somewhere else for a while, and then got an apartment about 2 blocks from here. Stayed there for 5 years, and then bought this house.
Yeah.
So
And by that time, you had 3 girls?
yes, I did.
Wow. Wow. Now, so when you came back here, you started going back to
St. Thomas More, yeah.
Okay. And were your girls raised as Catholics?
Yes, they were.
Okay. Now, were there any times in your adult life where religion became increasingly more or less important to you?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I really don't think so.
So it's always kind of played a real prominent role.
Yeah.
Okay. And have there been any times that you can remember where it really got you, it got you through stuff that maybe you wouldn't have gotten through, where you could attribute?
Yeah. Yeah. My mother, if she said it once, she said it 1,000 times to me in my lifetime, let go and let God.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm just now being able to admit that I'm a control freak, and I want to know, I'm a planner, and I want to know how everything is going to work, and I want it to work out the way I want it to work out, of course. And so a lot of times something would be happening way down here, and I'd be trying to figure out how to make it work, and my mother would say, just turn it over to God and relax, you know? And so I can very vividly remember the first time I remember doing this about anything serious was when I was grown. And I had to have an interaction with someone, and I didn't know what I was going to do, and I kept thinking of sentences and phrases and words to use and so forth. And my mom said, I called my mom, I said, what am I going to do? You know, this is really important. She said, turn it over to God and let Him do it. And so I pulled up outside the house and sat in the car, and I said, okay, God, it's yours. Just let me say what I need to say. And I walked in, and while I was having that conversation, I realized that I was asking questions I hadn't even thought about. I was saying words I hadn't even planned. And I came out of there, and I just said, good job. Good job. And I have that every now and then. I've been able to do that. Not always, unfortunately, because I'm hardwired to just be the way I am, you know.
Yeah.
But every time I've turned things over, things work out much better than anything I could have ever done.
Right.
So I keep trying to do that more and more.
More and more. So in your adult life, have you had encounters or relationships with people of other religions, and when did that start, if it did?
I really don't know. When I was at Emory, I met a lot of Jewish girls,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, they were funny, they were nice, and yet I didn't feel the need to go to temple with them or anything.
Right.
But they were just really nice,
Mm-hmm.
and I never had any kind of feelings of animosity toward
Mm-hmm.
Jewish people. I mean, after all, Jesus was Jewish, you know.
Right.
But I didn't think of that then. And as far as black people were concerned, I was a big civil rights believer,
Mm-hmm.
and I just felt so bad for what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I never grew up with any kind of prejudice, and I can't say good for me, because I didn't even see black people. I didn't know black people. Decatur
Right.
was just so black and white.
Mm-hmm.
And see, Beacon, I don't know whether you know about Beacon Hill.
No.
There's an area where the police department is in Decatur,
Mm-hmm.
and that particular building was, I think, the high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember once in the Methodist, or some MYF thing we did, we met a group of black church people,
Mm-hmm.
and had some sort of social event, or cokes and cookies or something,
Right.
and just talked. That was big stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, this is cool, we should have more of this. And I felt when I was here, there was one bishop, and I can't remember his name, but segregation was beginning to happen in the schools, and I was already a mother.
You mean integration?
Integration,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yes, yeah. Wrong word. Integration was beginning to happen in schools, and people were forming their own private schools to keep their children away from black people. A lot of the private schools were, just being formed by different groups.
Any of them that are still in?
I do not know. But this particular bishop we had said, we will not take any new students in our schools. We have enough now, because they were already integrated. The
Catholic schools
were integrated, and he did not want an influx of white students fleeing from
Right.
black students. And my kids went to school with black kids. There were more whites than blacks in their class,
Mm-hmm.
but there were more Protestants than Catholics around,
Right.
too. And these black kids were good friends. I mean, birthday parties, they were there.
Mm-hmm.
We had a little girl that was a friend of Susie's, and they would spend the night in each other's homes, and
Mm-hmm.
just had a wonderful time.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Wow. Huh.
yeah.
Now, did was anything else ever said in the churches about the civil rights movement? Can you remember any of the priests discussing it during their sermons?
I do not. I remember one priest discussing the Vietnam War.
Really?
Yes, and he had people getting up and walking out. But I don't remember anything about that, about black and white.
What did he say about the Vietnam War?
I cannot remember. We were in the choir, and we were up kind of above. Catholic choirs used to be back behind and up into in sort of a balcony. And I can't remember what he said. I can ask Rick if you're really interested, because he remembers everything. But a lot of people, not a lot of people, but there were people that got up and walked out. That I just really don't know what he was saying.
But
don't
against
remember.
it, I guess. Yeah.
Against some of
Yeah.
the things that were being done, I think.
Yeah. Wow. Now, did you have occasion to make friends or become associated with people that were not Christian and not Jewish, so not of Muslims, Hindus, atheists, anybody like that?
Let me just say one thing about black people. I really wanted a black friend. I thought this would be good because then I could understand what's going on. But I wasn't going to force anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I did campfire for the girls at St. Thomas More, and one of the other ladies that worked with me, campfire girls, and it was black. And so I did have a relationship with her, not a personal relationship particularly because we didn't visit back and forth, but we were both very busy with our families and stuff. But I did have that. And when I worked at Decatur, finally, I got a really close, good black woman as a friend. And she's one of my dearest friends. She's one of the most beautiful people I've ever known, and inside as well as outside. And so I appreciate having that now. But you ask about different faiths. I don't remember any other faiths. Now, I can't think of the piano player, the lady piano player who's Audrey Shakir sings, and I shouldn't mention her name, perhaps, but I think she's Muslim, and all this jihad business when that was happening, Rick was working with her one night, and he said, "Would you explain jihad to me?" And she did, and which is nothing like what was being done. I mean, she's a real Muslim. Or was at the time. I don't know what her. I shouldn't be saying this on this tape. Take this off this tape. Okay. But anyway, that was interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because it never come up in conversation. I think a lot of people just don't discuss their beliefs particularly.
Now, what are your practices now? Your religious practices, spiritual practices.
Well, I say prayers.
Do you do the Catholic prayers now? Or are you still just talking to God?
Sometimes, yeah. I usually do my own prayers in the morning and at night, but when I go to church, I do the other. And I got so annoyed at our computer that takes so long to do things now, and because it's old, and so when I click on my name and it gets me on, but I have to get to the internet, it takes so long. And I used to just fume and fuss, and now I just say, "And Our Father, a Hail Mary, and a glory be to the Father," the whole prayers, while I'm waiting. And usually when I finish, it's there.
That's wonderful. Saint Isidore is the patron saint of computers,
yes,
too. So you may want to put a picture up on the computer.
That's right, I should.
Well, let me ask you this. Are you comfortable talking about your Reiki practice?
Yeah.
Okay. How did you get into that? And when was that?
That was it. My body's been falling apart for years, and I hurt something, hip, I think, and there was a professor at Georgia State that had mentioned that she had been healed by a Reiki healer. So I called this person, and she said, I just can't take you on, but I have a student who I feel could, and she has kind of gone into business for herself, so to speak. And so she worked on me, and I thought that was, good, and it felt good, and so then I started thinking about if I could do this to myself, this would be good,
Yeah.
So I started looking around, and I know God led me to this woman because of the friendships that formed afterward, plus the fact that she happened to be a really good teacher. But at DeKalb Medical, and I was still working there, and in the wellness center, they offered a class on Reiki. And so I asked Rick if that would be okay if I spent some money, for Reiki. And he said yes. So I did go to the 5 sessions, and I have my little diploma that says I'm a first degree Reiki person.
Yeah.
I don't know what it says. But there were 5 of us in the class, just 5. And by the end of that session and doing Reiki on each other, we felt very close, very closely connected. So we said we'd like to get together and do it again, have Reiki sessions with each other. And so we planned a time and a day, met. The fifth person did not show up. So we called her, and so she said, well, maybe I can make the next one. She didn't make the next one. She was recovering from cancer, and I wondered if maybe she just didn't feel like it or what.
Yeah.
But anyway, the four of us stayed together from May of 1998 to present day.
Wow.
And we would meet like every other month for a long time, and then maybe a few months more in between, and then it got to be, people got busy, you know, and so then just recently one of us moved to Maine, retired, and he and his wife built a house in Maine, moved there. So now there are just three of us. But they were here. That's who brought me the roses. The guy brought the roses, and the other lady and I provided the food, and we did Reiki. I've got a massage table, and the guy has a massage table. So and he lives in somewhere at the edge of the earth, and sometimes we go to his house, and we don't have to take a table because he's got one. And I used to try to take one to Jackie's, but it just didn't work out. So now she said, if you have us at your house, I know you have to clean up and get everything ready and everything, and I'll bring the food. So that's our situation now.
Nice. And how often do you do that?
Not nearly often. Yeah, months go by, you know. But the guy is a Tuskegee Airman, and he has a lot of, Black History Month just about, every day there's something going on.
Right.
But he does a lot of work with young people, and he took somebody to some big place in NASA or something, and they got to ride in a module, or he met a test pilot, or he takes them to he's trying to get Black young people interested in things like being pilots or whatever,
Is he Black? Oh, okay.
Do you not know about the Tuskegee?
Oh, I know about the Tuskegee. Yeah, I know all about that. Yeah. Oh, okay, got it. And how do you feel when you're doing the Reiki? And has that always just kind of seamlessly fit into your Catholicism? Has there ever been any?
There was a time there when I was being given the power, so to speak, that we had to close our eyes and we couldn't see what she was doing, and so I didn't know, I had is this okay kind of thing, but since it's to help people, I decided it probably was, and it certainly didn't put anything above God or anything. And the way the teacher explained it to us was there was a teacher who went looking for the answer to how Jesus healed people, and then got this. He stayed out, on top of a mountain for X number of days and fasted and stuff and prayed, and so that's kind of what she started with us, and so Usuki, I think was his name, and so then he passed it to other people, and then there's all kind of different kind of Reiki, but the Usuki system is the original system. And I was just lucky enough to get that, and so she was a wonderful teacher, and the whole time that I don't know whether it was an initiation or it probably has a name, and I can't remember. It's been so long, but I prayed the entire time that she was doing whatever she was doing. I just
Nice.
prayed. I don't know what I said, but I put myself, with God at the time. And then every time I begin Reiki, I just always say, thank you, God, for the gift of Reiki. Please send your healing, universal healing power to this person.
Wow.
And all of us, when we touch or just hold our hands or whatever, Look at these hands.
They're beautiful.
Arthritis. But claw. But I just, I'm amazed at how, when I receive Reiki from my friends, I'm very, very relaxed. I mean, just very, very, very relaxed. And when I give it, I'm relaxed as well. And so it's supposedly coming down, you know, out my head. And as it passes through, I guess, it makes me feel very relaxed. So it's good for all of us, whether we're giving it or getting it.
Yeah, yeah. Do you do Reiki on other people other than the people in your group?
I have done it on my family. I don't recall doing it on anybody but my family. But when a grandchild would injure themselves, you know, I would say, do you want some Reiki? And yes, and you know, and I remember one looked up at me one time and she said, I can feel the heat in your hands. So interesting.
Well, talking about your family, you have your 3 daughters, and how many grandchildren do you have?
Well, I used to say just the 10. That was, you know, bloodlines, and then I gained 2 step grandsons when one of our daughters remarried. But I don't like step because we didn't use it in our family for step.
Yeah.
So then I could say I had 12, and then 2 of them have since married. 2 of our grandchildren have married, so now I can say 14, and one of them is engaged.
Oh, okay, so 14 and a half.
Big family, big family. We take up 2 pews in church.
Is everyone Catholic?
Everyone except the stepchildren and the in-laws are not Catholic. The 2 in-laws are not Catholic, and the 2 stepchildren are not Catholic. Everybody else was baptized Catholic and confirmed Catholic. Okay. All of ours were. Some go to church, some don't. One's in seminary for the Birmingham diocese. And then, you know, I don't know, some of them had to work on Sundays. They were servers, and they had to work on Sundays. And so they did it for the money, you know. They wanted to keep their jobs and have the pay, and so they worked and couldn't seem to work it out. And then, having not been in so long, you know, then sometimes they would just sleep through and all that, and just decide not to go, and some of them just decided not to go. So I don't know where they are. Right. I just know that they're all good people, and I know that God loves them, and I don't know what their connection with God is, but they're good people, and I pray for them, and we do what we can.
And just last, before we start on the GSU stuff, well, first of all, how do you identify yourself religiously today?
Catholic.
And now, compared to other areas of your identity, how important is your religious identity to you?
I think it's the underpinning of the whole thing.
Okay.
Because being Catholic, and that's one reason why I love being in a Catholic choir, or I sew cancer pads for the cancer home, like a lot of other church people do, you know, but everybody in the room is Catholic, and it's like I'm home, you know. It's like we're all coming from the same place, and it's very comforting somehow. To be with people that, you know, think like you do. And Rick and I have based our marriage on that, and our children, you know, we say grace before meals. Always, Rick and I do, and when we're the families together, you know. 2 of the girls married Catholics, and Jody did not. Well, actually, she did marry a Catholic. He was a new Catholic. He converted. I was his godmother, but he had some problems later, her first husband. And,
Yeah.
So I asked him one time, I said, are you still Catholic? And he said, I consider myself an American Catholic, which to me means cafeteria Catholic, which means you take what you want and remove the rest. So I really don't know.
Yeah.
He's had a hard time, and so we'll see. I pray for him.
Very good. Okay. And last, have you had any particularly powerful, important, or meaningful religious or spiritual experiences that we haven't yet discussed?
I'll think of them right after you drive away.
I'm sure you will. You could call me and we'll do an addendum.
I marvel sometimes at the way things have dovetailed in my life. And my mom used to say, I'd be fretting about, well, this is, I don't know. And she'd say, that poem about the tapestry, do you know that, where God is weaving? I think it's called God's Weaving. And just think of God sitting up there in heaven making a tapestry. And he sees the whole picture, but we're below it, and we see the knots and the way, if you do a tapestry, you kind of zip over this way, and it's not at all pretty on the bottom, but on the top, it's lovely. And she would say, God is working out all the details, and when everything is just right, it will happen. And I used to tell Jody that. She was raising 5 children essentially by herself for much of the time that she was alone before she married again, which was like 15 years or something. And I kept saying, there's a guy out there, God's just working it out. And when the time was right, they met, and it has worked out beautifully. They love each other very, very much.
That's great.
Yeah. But that's just an example of, things just have to work together. And my mother, again, all things work together for good. So if you give it enough time and, it's like chaos theory or something, I guess. If you stand back far enough and you give it enough time, it'll work. You'll see it. Yeah.
Cool. All right, well, we're going to talk a little bit about Georgia State. And so when did you go back to Georgia State?
1984.
And did any of your master's classes transfer? Or did you have to start all over again?
Oh, I lost everything. It had been so long.
So 1984.
But all those hours did get me jobs as adjunct faculty teaching English in, I taught for DeVry, I taught for National Louis, I taught for the University of St. Francis.
Okay.
So I did get to use those 45 hours of coursework.
Okay.
So I did get to do that, and I would do that, in addition to my day job.
Okay.
But no, nothing. And I started out in adult education because I decided I wanted to be a trainer. And then after a few courses, and I could just take one at a time because I was working full time, and driving from Lawrenceville when I started to Georgia State, because I was working for the Gwinnett Hospital System. And so I had the opportunity to move from adult ed to human resource development. They were just putting that in. And so I called my then son-in-law, who was a professor, and I said, and he was very active in the training society, ASTD, and which I had joined just to mingle with the people I wanted to know and work with. And he said, I said, I have an opportunity here to go to human resource development. And he said, do you want to work? And I said, yes. And he said, switch.
Wow.
So I switched to HRD. And although my diploma says Master's of Education, but it's a BS, not a BA. I mean an MS, not an MA.
Okay.
So I switched then to training, and all the training. And at the time, you wrote your own curriculum. There was a few core courses you had to have, and then they had all these courses that you could choose in different areas, and they were putting together their stuff. Always get in on the new stuff because you get the best deal, I think. I took courses from different, disciplines and different things, and had an advisor. And if a course looked interesting to me, I would take it.
Great.
And I learned so much, and it was just a wonderful experience.
Oh, that's great. And, okay, so what is thinking back at your time at GSU, 1984, what is your strongest memory of religion associated with GSU? Do you have one?
I don't exactly have a memory of religion because I would go after work, I would take a night class, I would leave, and I would come home, just worn out, I did not join anything. I deeply resented the fact that I had to pay an athletic fee or an activity fee for all that stuff I wasn't able to take advantage of,
Yeah.
Kid didn't care a hoot about the basketball game, I practically had kids that would be playing there, and I just wanted to be done.
Okay.
But the thing that I loved about Georgia State was I'd have classes, several floors up, so I'm walking up the stairs, and on every landing there'd be a group of somebody speaking some language I didn't know what it was. And then I'd go up to the next level, and here's another group of people speaking another language. And I just thought, this is the most culturally diverse place I've ever been in my life, and I just love that we have that here in Atlanta. But I can't say a thing about the
religion
because I never took.
Yeah. Did you? So, did you compare yourself to other people at all at GSU in terms of religion? Did it ever kind of come up in your mind?
Never crossed my mind.
Did you ever meet people there of other religions, of other non-Christian religions?
I may have and not realized it. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I had a very interesting classmate once who wore no jewelry at all, wore very plain clothes, very plain hair, and somehow or other it came up in conversation, there's nothing distinctive about this person, I mean, she was in the conversation, and she said, I don't want to be singled out, I just want to blend in. And then she said one time, I threw away my calendar because I decided that anything that's important I'll remember. And she was basically just putting it out to the universe to take care of her somehow or other. And I thought it was a very interesting concept, but I didn't see her enough to, And she said, I don't want anybody to remember who I was or remember,
Do you remember who she? Do you remember her name?
No, I never.
It'd be fascinating to Google her.
I couldn't. Yeah, I couldn't remember. I don't remember anybody's name anymore. That was a long time ago, but I just remember she, like I can kind of picture her in a dark skirt and a white blouse and very plain, nondescript hair. I could not identify her for anything at all. But she said, I don't want anybody to know anything about me by the way I look. Now, if that's a religion, I did meet one person.
Was she younger than you?
Yeah, everybody was younger than me.
Everybody?
Just about, yeah.
Oh.
Just about.
How long did it take you to graduate?
It took me 4 years, going one quarter. And I dropped out a quarter after my mom got sick and passed away.
Yeah.
And I dropped out another quarter, and I can't remember why, but there was a good reason. I just had too much going.
Yeah. Did you do a thesis for your program?
No, and that is why I chose this program. I just didn't want to write anything that lengthy, and I had started when I was at Auburn getting doing research.
Right.
And as much research, I love research, but I hate having to write about it. I just want to know it and then move on. So I just picked a course. We had a final exam, and the professor, our major professor, created the exam just for us. It was a tailored exam just for us and the courses we had taken.
Oh, okay. And you passed that.
I did. The professor called and I said, "How did I do?" And he said, "Well, you didn't distinguish yourself, but you passed." That's all I wanted.
That's good. Let's see. And if someone were to ask you to describe the religious environment at Georgia State back then, what would you say?
I would say, I am so sorry, but I had nothing to do with it, and I had absolutely no idea what was going on.
Do you have any reason to have any association with Georgia State since you've graduated?
There was a jazz scholarship in Rick's name that a friend started, and had a roast for Rick, and people signed up, and there was a guy there that said the master of ceremony says, and he pledges $2,000 to this, and everybody clapped, and then I found out later he had volunteered to take it on to make, from then on, to be in charge of it, Never heard a word from him, never got any money from him. So the money that was raised that night, plus any more that anybody had, I think the two bands that Rick was rehearsing at the time pledged to, they were charity bands, and they gave some money. And I know one of our daughters and her husband supported it, and we did when we had money,
right?
Because we were both working, and so we would give to it every year. But since we retired, we have not.
Right.
And finally, somebody just called and said, we think we'll just not do this anymore if that's okay with you. And so we called our daughter, and I think the guy that heads up the jazz program there was trying to do more, and he'd give concerts and all this kind of stuff to try to do it, but finally I think it just kind of petered out because it didn't have the backing that it needed to have, and I wish it had. I wish we'd been able to do more. I wish I'd been able to take it over, but I was working and I just couldn't. So that was our only tie really with Georgia State, other than the fact that a lot of Rick's friends and some of my friends in the music business teach there, and we've been to concerts, but we don't go anymore.
Down there. Okay. And just, are there any questions that I've left out that would be important to understanding your religious life, or anything else you want to say?
I'll think of it when you drive away.
When I drive away. Oh. Okay. Well, I just need to get some demographic information.
Okay.
What is your occupation?
I am a retired educator and homemaker, I suppose. Not retired from that. I'm a homemaker and retired educator.
That's the correct verbiage. And when and where were you born?
Decatur, Georgia. Actually, I was born at Emory University, Georgia. It had its own post office.
Oh.
And I was born over there in Emory Hospital, but it was called Wesley Memorial Hospital at the time, on January 31st, 1937.
Okay. And how do you describe your ethnicity?
Am I supposed to tell the color that my skin is? Is that what ethnicity is? Yeah,
Census.
I'm a Caucasian.
Caucasian.
I'm a Caucasian. I have English and Irish ancestors.
Okay. And your educational background?
Scots-Irish. Scots-Irish. My educational. Okay, I went to Emory for 7 quarters. I finished my BA at Auburn, which was then Alabama Polytechnic Institute, in December of 1957. I was 20 years old, and I started being, I went right into being a graduate assistant. When I was 20 years old, I was teaching people that were coming back from the Korean War. So here I was, and never taught before, but I was muddling through. There were a whole bunch of us who were doing that in the temporary buildings there at Auburn. And then I stayed there and got 45 hours, of work toward a master's and was all ready to start writing my thesis when I walked away. And then in 1984, I went to Georgia State, and by taking one course at a quarter and skipping a couple times, I graduated in December again of 1988 with a Master of Science in Education with a concentration in Human Resource Development.
And your marital status?
And
Sorry.
I decided I wanted an EDD some years ago. I was still working, and there was a school that another guy, a guy in the office was going to. I keep forgetting about this, and it was 20 years ago, and it was California Coast University. And he said, Danny, I'm getting a master's. And he said, they send you the materials, they give you a bunch of questions, they send you the book, you answer the questions, you send them back. He got his master's that way, I think.
Oh, okay.
But that sounded good. So I enrolled, and they took the money right out of the savings, the checking account. And I completed one course toward that. And then I was in the middle of taking another one when Jody had her last baby. And by that time her husband was no longer in the home, and a friend of hers went to help her have the baby, which broke my heart. And she called me and said, I'm going to have the baby tonight, I think. And so I said, okay. And I was working on that, and I closed the book, and I went back to it once, and I thought, what am I doing this for? And so I quit. And I still have a thing up on the inside of my pantry door from California Coast, and I've written on top of it, finish what you started. But I have no need for it now, and although it would be fun to have, it turned out that it was more public school stuff rather than adult ed.
Right.
They don't even give the degree anymore, I don't think. So I just lost, several $1,000s. And that's been all. And a dream, but hey, we lose things.
Yeah. And you're married?
I am.
And you have, I think you already answered this, 3 daughters?
3 daughters.
And your GSU affiliation is alumni, correct?
I'm an alumni.
Okay.
Alumni.
And your current religious affiliation is?
Roman Catholic.
Roman Catholic. Okay, great.
I'll say Roman Catholic because there's an Anglican Catholic and various kinds of Polish Catholic and so forth. So I'm Roman.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. This has been really wonderful. This has been great.
Well, I hope I didn't babble on too